Lawsome, the podcast for law firms. Powered by ConsultWebs.
Welcome back to Lawsome, the only podcast for law firms that markets the marketing about marketing, because that's what it takes these days. We're here to inform, educate, and entertain the legal community on the latest in legal marketing and law firm development. Jake Sanders here with Paul Julius. Paul, teleportation or flying? Which superpower would you want?
I'm going to go with teleporting. Teleporting is unaffected by weather and wind speed and stuff like that. I think I'll just go with teleportation sheerly for the convenience of it. What about you?
I was just trying to think, flying is obviously the romantic thing, but if conditions are bad, it's not a good look.
Yeah, you got to put on the leotard and the cape, and I mean it's kind of a lot of hassle.
Oh gosh. What if
responsibilities?
What if the only way you could teleport is nude, and you'd have to show up and tell people to have some clothes there for you?
Oh, like Arnold in Terminator?
Yes. Wow. How could they not take their sorry, clothes? Can't clothes? Nope. Can we do clothes? No. Sorry. We can do people though. Yeah, people. Clothes? No.
I would just teleport into a Old Navy. just
constantly buying Old Navy clothes every time. So there's the cost.
Again. We never see him come in, but he always spends $200.
We should probably jump ahead or fly to tell people the next destination on our show.
So today we're going to be talking about data collection, storage, and data security for law firms. First, with an article from Spirion, and then we talk to Senior Counsel for Privacy and Compliance at Spirion, Scott Giordano. And then we try our hand at social engineering with 5 questions we ask everyone.
Pull up a plate. It's the Hot Takes Buffet.
The article today is from Spirion.com. It's written by Elizabeth McKinnon. It's entitled, Why You Need to Know Where Your Sensitive Data Is and How to Protect It. It's pretty amazing, man. Scott goes on later in the interview to lay out this reality, but it's scary stuff. I mean, where data is, especially in law firms of all sizes, in what form, and how do you account for it? The legal regulations that are coming into play, it's just it's a nice article that outlines the realities, which I think are scary. Because, look at this, the time and cost to recover from a data breach. Data and privacy breaches continue to grow, with more than 33 billion records projected to be stolen in 2023, a 175% increase, Elizabeth writes. And look at this. It takes the average company 279 days to recover from an attack, ransomware or whatever. You don't think of that stuff until it's too late. So I just thought this was a great hot take. It's scary. Thankfully, these are the people who have solutions. My hot take is check it out. What do you think, Paul?
My eyes were really opened talking to Scott later, and this article mentions it. First, about the regulations. It's really complicated to know what privacy laws are in place where, what you have to be compliant with, and exactly what compliant means.
Wow.
And to add on to that, in being compliant, you're going to have to look around and understand where things are stored, and that doesn't mean just like in Google Drive. It means there's stuff on people's laptops.
Oh, look at this. It says Microsoft Office, PDF, text, and other unstructured data formats, IT infrastructure like Gmail, cloud repositories like Box, Dropbox, databases, Amazon storage, web email, Microsoft Office. It's like all of this different layers. Where is it? And it's in the cloud. Or is it in the cloud? Or is it in some crazy closet?
Well, I think that's the biggest thing is that people are like, oh, it's off in the cloud. And we learn, from Scott later, just about, cloud versus, local storage and stuff like that. And
Right.
I check it out because
Mhm.
what he says about local storage is eye-opening. Very
It's the truth.
eye-opening.
And it's the
Yeah.
truth. And it's what a lot of folks are facing. But answers are here. Guidance is here. And good advice is here, about data security, because it's something that you just want to focus on now before it becomes an issue. And that's a threat. But you don't have to sweat, because guess what's next? Our guest, Scott Giordano, who's bringing the spicy oregano of data privacy knowledge. And he's basically a wizard blessing us with incantations to protect us.
Yep.
So throw down a circle of salt, say a prayer to your local Wiccan god,
Put on your wizard hat.
put on your wizard hat, and let's teleport out of here.
Let's go.
Lawson continues. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Any lawyer looking to grow their business online can generate more leads from their website by hiring ConsultWebs. After working with lawyers exclusively since 1999, we've tested thousands of web designs and marketing strategies, so we know what flips and what flops. For more information, visit www.consultwebs.com today.
And now, a Lawson interview.
Scott Giordano is an attorney with more than 20 years of legal technology and risk management consulting experience. Currently serves as senior counsel for privacy and compliance at Spirion, a leader in rapid identification and protection of sensitive data, advising on multinational data protection and its intersection with technology. He's stopped living in the future to join us in the present on Lawsome, and we thank him for using his time-traveling capabilities to see us. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's great to be here.
Cool, man. So talk about Spirion. Give us, the elevator pitch.
Sure.
What do you do? Who do you help?
Sure. We are a tech firm headquartered in St. Pete, Florida, and we publish software for what we call data discovery and classification. So imagine that you're trying to find all of the personal information or sensitive information that's within your environment. I call it an information ecosystem, but it's basically whatever is in your firm and in the cloud and all of the associated places that we all put data. And you have to get an idea of where the data is, who has access to it, what you're doing with it, essentially creating a directory or an inventory of that data. And then say that you have one of those data classification policies where you say something's public or it's internal use or it's restricted. We electronify that. So we marry those two things up so that if you've got documents that are sensitive, they're marked as such, and other things that you have in your arsenal, so a DLP or whatever, can read that and go, okay, this isn't going to leave the firm, this isn't going to leave the company, stays right here. And it's a great way to identify your data and protect it and make sure the bad guys don't get it.
And we, client-wise, are you talking solo, small firms, big firms? Who?
Everyone, big firms. Although we tend to go for enterprise organizations, so all the big Fortune 500 organizations, we tend to go for those folks. Less so for firms, although we talk to them occasionally. But I wish we would talk to them more because they have plenty of data that needs to be protected.
And speaking of client market, like benchmarks here, the amount of law firms that have handled this already, that have good data discovery and classification policies, like you're saying, versus the ones that don't. Like what
My guess is probably a couple percentage points have really good data discovery and classifications. And I've spent enough time in the legal profession to know that this is unfortunately not a big priority for firms, and it should be.
Okay. You said that very democratically, and I appreciate that. It's in the single digits of people that are taking it seriously. Why is it such a second tier concern? Do you think, or why doesn't it rise to prominence?
It's for the same reason that it's not a concern for a lot of Fortune 500 companies. It's a cultural issue. It's easy to think of privacy and security as something that you add on to your product or you bolt onto it, rather than in just an intimate part of the product or the service. And I think you have to. I'll give you guys an analogy that you'll appreciate. Think about back in the 70s when it was super easy to steal cars because you could buy this thing called a Slim Jim on the on mail order, and
Love
it
it.
would open any car, and then you were good to go to steal a thing because privacy, or in this case, security, wasn't baked into it. And it took what, 20 years or so before the auto manufacturers got wise and started making it really hard to steal cars. It's just, we're at that point right now in the data privacy and security world where it's just something that's not thought of except as an afterthought. And that's the reason why it's just such a mess. So it's ultimately a cultural issue.
I love it. And the Slim Jims are easily available to get into the law firm data. Well, and so speaking of security, speaking of maybe the vectors at which we find ourselves, millions of Americans are suddenly working from home, and the security implications are like unexpected. You're not sure. So when it comes to law firms that have migrated to remote operations, there are some unique concerns. Can you outline a few that
Sure.
that we're thinking and that you're seeing?
Sure, there's some huge threats. Three things: one, to attorney-client privilege, which is probably number one on the list, but to trade secrets if you're involved in any kind of an IP practice, and then export control, because and I spend a fair amount of time in my own practice involved in export control and regulation, because it's very easy to violate export laws. People have no idea that you can just show someone who's not shouldn't be privy to it information on your screen, and that's considered an export. So very easy to violate any one of those three, but attorney-client privilege really is number one for your audience, I'm sure.
Wow. And so export control. Can you speak a little bit more to that, like the unknowns?
Sure.
Are there known knowns and unknown knowns?
Absolutely. Here's the funny thing about export control is, say that you have someone in the room that's a foreign national, a non-US person, as we would call them. If they look at documentation you have that you've printed out, or it's on your screen, or it's maybe all over your spare room, if that's where you've got your documentation that when you moved home, that's an export. And right away, now you're subject to sanctions by the State Department. And this is really one of the big revelations to me when I got involved in the defense industry, was looking at all the different ways you could accidentally export things. You could just accidentally email, I mean, plans to the F-35 jet, no exaggeration, and wind up getting in trouble with the State Department or other agencies. And it's a big challenge, and it's something that people don't think about until it's too late.
Oh, wow.
So now here's some weird ones, but I want to get your thoughts on this stuff because a lot of Jake and I we were working remote before the pandemic. We're fortunate enough that this whole company is been we've been set up for this, but there's some odd stuff that people who are just going remote may not consider. And I'm curious how law firms or lawyers might approach it, but things like Alexa,
Oh yeah. Oh
or
yeah.
we've all seen the videos of people on a conference call and their kid runs in or a spouse walks by.
And their kid is wearing a lapel microphone.
Yeah, totally. It
You're
is
like,
a
"Ah!"
foreign national. No, but the point is, these actually, I mean, there's serious, from what you're saying here. It sounds like there's serious implications for a lawyer that maybe like Jake and I, we don't really have. But so, like, for example, like things that Internet of Things, Alexa, just Zoom conferences in your living room. Like, what are you seeing, and what should lawyers in particular be worried about?
What I'm seeing, and these things horrify me because I'm very old school, that the idea of having an Alexa or a Siri or any other of these voice assistants just is beyond the pale. I can't believe, one, anyone would actually put one of these in their home, but two, to have it anywhere near the office that you're working out of when you're working from home. Ditto for smart TVs, for anything that monitors your voice, because great, these things now, whenever they monitor your voice, this all winds up on a server somewhere. Who has control of the server? Who's sharing the data? I mean, think about the Cambridge Analytica issue, where
Mm.
I don't think that Facebook really had a good idea of what was being shared and what was being done with the data that they were sharing. And the same thing goes for Alexa or anything. I'm not picking on Alexa, but any of these smart TVs, voice assistants, they need to be just pulled out root and branch anywhere near your office, because great, now you've just shared your conversations with these folks
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know what they're going to be doing with it. Same thing with if you've got third parties in your house that are guests or what have you, and they're within earshot. There goes attorney-client privilege potentially. It's just, I mean, it's
Wow.
just endless the problems unless you really get very proactive.
Mm.
So to build on this data, and that's something that I don't know that a lot of people think of, because it's weird. We live in an age where people will download a Burger King app on their phone for a free cheeseburger and not realize that they've just literally given Burger King access to their entire phone.
Or the
Yeah.
hyper casual games, like
Sure.
Sure. And I think Alexa, I think once you have it and you get used to it, and you don't really think that like that thing's listening all the time, and where is that stuff going?
Sure.
It's an odd thing. So, like, speaking about that kind of data, like, what are some of the ways that your data can be used against you, and how can law firms protect themselves and their clients?
Well, I'll give you a particularly horrifying example because I seem to just be attracted to horrifying
This is
examples.
great. Yeah, this is juicy stuff.
And well, I mean, last month there was a cyclist in Maryland, and you may have already read the story, that was mistakenly misidentified as a suspect
Oh,
on an assault on a child on a trail that he happened to
jeez.
use regularly. And of course, he had a smartphone app that publicly shared his biking history. I'm not making this up. And so some internet sleuths got a hold of this history, looked at his fit picture and said he was close enough, and then posted his address on the internet. And of course, he got a torrent of hate.
Wow.
And just almost instantaneously, he had to go to the police and say, "Hey, it wasn't me," and what have you. But just using an app like that is just so dangerous, because it's sharing your public location wherever you go. You've just told the whole world, "Hey, here's where I'm going to be on a given time on a given day," if you use that same route regularly. So that's
Mm,
a great example, and it's something that we should all assume that it could happen to us.
mm. It's interesting how they hijack the reward system. Like, look how far I've gone. Look, look of how far I've come. Isn't it? Do you sort of do you notice anything about the way they hijack the behaviors of these platforms to sort of elicit that continued use? It's sort of a bummer because maybe you want to share those things, or
All those check-ins,
right.
Yeah, it's frustrating because I know these people do want to share what they're doing with everyone and show, what something for them to be proud of. And I think it's great. The problem is the potential for misuse is realized so much.
Yeah.
Folks have no idea that their geolocation data is being sold on the secondary market. There was a lawsuit the FCC had last year against the big four telecom providers, now the big three,
Mhm.
because they were selling location data to aggregators,
Right.
and then aggregators were selling that to bounty hunters and all kinds of other miscreants. And
Right.
of course, people found out and they complained to the FCC, and the FCC came down on the telecom providers. And just a great example of how data is just being sold without really any consideration of what's being done with it.
Mm. And so, talking about some of the data and misuse, and then advertising platforms, Facebook and Twitter, they use targeted stuff. There has been behaviors influenced by these platforms. Should law firms be concerned about advertising here? There's that big public boycott, and they say, well, we're taking off July, but we're coming back in August. So there's a weird vibe because small to medium-sized businesses have to keep the lights on.
Sure.
What can you speak on this?
Yeah, again, this is part of my frustration is that the internet and Facebook in particular, and Twitter in particular, but the internet in general just gives what I call asymmetric power to small groups. And you can do so much damage as a small organization or as a small intelligence agency, for example, that's so far beyond what we would have had in the pre-internet days. And so, yes, you have to be very concerned about your reputation. You have to manage it proactively. But even then, a concerted effort by a small group of bad guys can just absolutely ruin your practice. So you have to always understand that this is the world in which we live, and we can't put the genie back in the bottle.
So, speaking of laws and regulations that are out there that help us keep data secure, and we have some sort of governance around it, the GDPR, the CCPA, there's a lot of these new acronyms coming out. What do you think needs to be done here to be compliant and to find these standards? And what do you think law firms in particular need to embrace, especially around the way that they hold data? I mean, if you're saying you work with enterprise companies, they are hitting the CCPA limit of how much data they have, and then do they have to prove where it comes from? Is it deletable? I mean, speak to these new laws, and then the interrelationship with lawyers and law firms going forward.
The best way that lawyers can be compliant with all the alphabet soup of laws that we have now, and that's what I just referred to them collectively.
It's perfect. I understand.
Yeah, is to have a very good understanding of what personal data you have within your own environment. So and getting out of this PII mentality, which drives me bonkers. PII is very much a pre-internet concept. So think about what I call regular personal data: names, addresses, social security numbers, driver's license, passport. That's all what we would have called PII way back when. But now you have this other tier, which is machine readable data. So think about your IP address, your MAC address, your geolocation data. I mean, basically anything that's electronified is now personal data. Okay, because it could be cross-referenced and it could be used to track you down. Identifiers for advertising, IDFAs. Great example.
Right.
They're very precise for every device. So great example of that. So that's personal data. And then you've got what we call special personal data, things related to your health, your political views, your religious views, racial, ethnic, everything. That's all special data. That's got to be identified. So you've got a big job of just identifying the data. And the vast majority of organizations don't even know where the data is.
Right.
In fact, when I used to do projects for a consulting firm a couple years ago for GDPR, for every 2 applications I would find that used personal data in some way, we'd find a third that they didn't know about that was doing stuff. And that was remarkable. And it was consistent for every single customer. That's the problem, is that folks have no idea what personal data they have or why they have it in many cases, and who's doing stuff with it, and why should they have it in the first place. And those questions all have to be answered if you really want to have a grip on the alphabet soup of compliance laws.
So, in speaking to the marketing function, if you do run a company and you want to know a lot of this information and want to gain these insights, how are you? Everyone just says, get the data, get a bunch of data, snarf it up, and then we'll make sense of it. And I think it is a lot of this. People don't know what to do with the data. They just don't make sense of it. They end up collecting it, but they never make sense of it. Speaking to the people who want to make data-driven decisions and kind of access a little bit of this data, what are the considerations that you need to bring in to you have all this data. Now what? I think a lot of people are saying we're data-driven, but they don't. Come on. What does it mean?
Sure.
Can you help, just if somebody really is inspired to do this, maybe to change their marketing or to make a better decision in their practice management, or just, some small law firm that wants to do data, how do they get into it? Where do they look, and how do they compile it so they don't miss a lot of this stuff and they don't just snarf it up?
Yes, I agree. It's quality over quantity, which is the opposite of how everything used to be done.
Right.
But think about, and I'll give you an example from my GDPR days when I was doing on all the projects on getting that ready. The problem is that most organizations had bought data en masse and had no idea where it came from, didn't know if it was even legally collected, and they were using it in their systems. And I had to tell them, look, guys, you're going to have to dump all this stuff beyond a certain date, beyond the last 30 days or so, because you have no idea where it came from, and it's likely something that you probably shouldn't have anyway. Because the third parties that sold it to you didn't care where they got it from. We used to call this dirty data way back when, and now it's just data that you really should never have had in the first place. That's the problem. And I had to tell a lot of people some bad news, which seems to be part of my job, that they had to dump all the data in their marketing database and go for permission-based marketing. So go in, everyone that's opted in, or ask people to opt in, and to be able to say, okay, we're going to work from that. It's a smaller demographic, or it's a smaller base, if you will, but to continually build on opt-in marketing and to use that as your foundation rather than getting a lot of data that likely is not going to help you anyway, because the people that got it didn't really care where it came from.
Wow. It's a good one, Scott.
And they're still collecting it too. I think that's something that's scary, is everyone thinks, oh, this is the, after Cambridge Analytica, Facebook did this and that. No.
Or I'm buying an email.
You can still get all that stuff.
Yeah.
You just have to get it from a third party now. But they actually, sorry, this is a bit of a tangent, but Facebook actually actively solicits you to use that third party.
Yeah.
Like, it's still getting collected. It's Experian. They are like, hey, you want to get all that stuff? Just talk to these folks. Here, we'll connect you. It's like, wait a minute. That's a giant loophole we're jumping through here, folks.
Some people are just diving through with the legs, just woo.
It's so weird. And I feel Jake and I talk about this a lot. And then I promise I'll get to the next question. I'll step off my soapbox. But, it's so weird because it's so commonplace. Like when you're checking out, in an actual store. Remember when we did that? And they're like, hey, do you have an email address? Like, do you understand what's happening there? I don't know that a lot of people really understand how things are being collected and just how much of it. Like, now your transactions are tied to your phone, tied to your Facebook profile, tied to your behaviors. Like, and this is what people are selling. And this is what ends up, like what you're saying is dirty data. It's just out there in piles, terabytes of it. It's crazy.
It is. And here's what's important. Think about all the apps that are on your phone. The publisher of the app may not be making much money off selling the app. They're making all their money, or banking on it anyway, on selling it to others, because that's the business model. And we've all heard that, this idea that if it's free or it's cheap, it's because you're being sold as the product, but it's true. And so you have to look at your own iPhone, your own Android phone, and say, what are all the apps? Do I really need all these things? Because one, they talk to one another, and they shouldn't. And two, the publishers of the apps are selling this data out the back door. The Weather Channel got spanked for this a year or so ago. They were selling customer data without permission, and there's a pending lawsuit against them for doing that. You wouldn't think that the weather app would be doing that, but they were.
Well, it totally though. And I mean, honestly, like I downloaded a guitar tuner app and it wanted access to my photos. I was like, wait, what? For how? Why do you even need that? You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, so taking all this into consideration, all these data concerns and where you get it, how you store it, how you disclose it, how you keep it safe. What's one piece of advice you could give our listeners that they could start doing like right now today that would help improve their data security and compliance at their law firms?
What they should do is dump their IT infrastructure and move everything to the cloud. And this is something that probably should have been done a long time ago, because I would rather have the IT security professionals not babysitting a server. They should be implementing all of the policies and procedures and ideas that are out there for protecting personal data. And I think way too much time is spent on these arcane programs that firms probably bought 10 or 20 years ago and are still trying to keep alive. It's remarkable. Just dump it all, go to the cloud, have your people spend their time on things that are much more valuable.
It's so funny though, because in a lot of those law firms, there's an IT closet that looks like a spaghetti nightmare of wires. And you keep the guy with the ponytail around.
Yes. Yes, and frankly, the guy with the ponytail should be doing something much more important than babysitting that wiring closet or the server or anything else for that matter. There's just no need for it. The companies that run cloud services can do a much better job than we can.
God bless you, Scott. This has been amazing. How can people find you, Scott, on the internet and learn more about Spirion?
Oh, well, if they want to learn more about Spirion, they can just go to our website, and under the resources section, pretty much just everything I've done and others have done as far as webcasts, podcasts, white papers, everything's on there. They can feel free to download all of that. I've done probably 30 or 40 webcasts, so there's a lot of material there. And they can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to accept LinkedIn invitations, and I'm happy to talk to people, really from any practice. They don't have to be from privacy and security.
5 questions we ask everyone.
What was the last book you read?
Think Like a Rocket Scientist by Ozan Veral. Highly recommend it for everyone.
Excellent.
Nice. Number 2, what is your favorite place?
The Olympic Peninsula, which is about a 3-hour drive from here, but a wonderful place to be.
Nice. Number 3, what sites, blogs, newsletters, or podcasts do you regularly check in with?
My favorite podcast is the Bletchley Park podcast, which is about the group of people that broke the Enigma code. And I'm a bit of a closet crypto aficionado, we'll say. And so it's great to listen to the veterans that are still around from that period.
If you were number 4, if you were stranded on a desert island and could only pick one condiment to take with you, what would it be?
Oh, I'm going to be the contrarian here. It's going to be stone ground mustard.
Oh, come on. No, you find yourself in the majority here.
Really?
Everyone says mustard.
I thought that the Chirasha would be the majority. I'm amazed.
No.
Yes.
In the meager data we collect on this show, we actually do collect.
Oh no,
the data
I
on
have
this
pivot
answer.
tables. I have pivot
Mustard
tables.
mustard's number 1, and we're grateful for the clarification, because we have to go back and people are like mustard, and we're like, all right,
Thank you.
is it Dijon? Is it stone ground? So
Scott ain't playing.
yeah, no, I love it. Okay, last one. After a long day or a long week at work, how do you relax and unwind?
I relax hiking in the Issaquah mountain range, which is about a 10-minute drive from here. So a great place to work out all my frustrations and get some exercise.
For show notes, links, and info, go to thelawsonpodcast.com or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. Be sure to leave us a review and rating in iTunes or wherever you find the you listen to. Until next week, stay lawson.